And I just wanted to play off of what Chris had said about the fact that it is much more than environmental. And we'll talk about this a little bit more as the conversation goes on. But when you look at the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, environmental is just a portion of that. There's also communities and education and hunger and poverty and all sorts of things that not only go beyond environmental, but the railroad can also support. And so, to your point, well, when we talk to folks who aren't directly related to environmental, maybe it's somebody related to running a short line through a community out in the middle of rural Texas. That the sustainable goal for them might not have to do with bugs and bunnies or water quality. It might have to do with making a more sustainable community by providing access for that community to foodstuffs they might not actually or normally have, or transportation to go to another place and expand their horizons. So there's a lot of things that involved in sustainability that go way beyond environmental, and to just think of it as an environmental goal is probably to limit your view of what sustainability really does and how it helps and improves our communities and really does make things more cost effective in the long run, which people might not normally assume.
You may know the American Railway Engineering and Maintenance of Way Association, or AREMA, as the, quote, keepers of the manuals. You may know them as the, quote, people behind the largest annual railroad conference in North America. Heck, you may not know about AREMA at all. This podcast is designed, no pun intended, to change your view of who AREMA is and how AREMA has changed the trajectory of many railway careers over its 100-plus year history. Welcome to Platform Chats with your host, Walt Blesser, where he takes a moment to discuss the impacts AREMA has had on the very people who are proud to be called members. Are you ready to roll with AREMA?
Unabridged Structures is a proud supporter of AREMA and Platform Chats, specializing in innovative and practical solutions for railway and transportation infrastructure. Unabridged Structures brings clarity and creativity to complex structural challenges. Learn more at unabridgedstructures.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Platform Chats. I am your host, Walt Blesser. Believe it or not, we're quickly coming up on episode 50. Not quite there yet, but we're coming up on 50 episodes of Platform Chats. It's pretty wild every time I create one of these and look at that number getting closer to 50. Been going on for over 5 years now. Thanks to all of you that have been loyal listeners. Thanks to all of you that have been supportive, and appreciate everyone that came out to the AREMA National Conference and made it to our Emerging Technologies panel, which I've said before was spawned. Love that word. Spawned from the podcast about 3 years ago or so. And if you have been listening, we had so many questions there. We did a follow-up podcast, and hopefully by now you have had a chance to listen to that one. That was actually pretty entertaining to make. Did our absolute best to answer as many of your questions as were submitted. And word on the street is it's not official yet, but we might be having another really cool tech panel in Kansas City at the 2026 AREMA National Conference. So enough about the conference. I think we've beat that one to death. Let's talk about another upcoming conference. We're going to talk about the RREC conference. I'll let my two guests today talk about what that means. I don't need to steal any thunder. I have a returning guest to the podcast today, and I also have a brand new guest to the podcast today. And so we're going to talk a little bit about sustainability and resiliency and the importance of frankly, the fundamental concept that, and I'm going to steal a little soundbite here, the fundamental concept that the sustainability transcends the environment and encompasses all aspects of railroad engineering and operation. One of my guests provided that. I'll let you guess who that was, but it was a great statement that was made. So without further ado, let's let the new guy, you want to go first? Does that sound good, Peter?
Absolutely. Happy to do so. Thanks for having me on the podcast. This is Peter Masson. I am a director of planning and permitting and licensing with TRC located in the San Francisco Bay Area. I live in Oakland. I think my first interaction with railroads was my Lionel train set that my dad bought for me for my 5th birthday. So I've been a little fascinated with them ever since. But I grew up in Michigan on a chicken farm, went to University of Michigan, got a degree in biology. And so my focus has always been on biology. But I spent my first 14 years of my career after graduation actually working for the state of Michigan, and not with biology. I was doing emergency response, nuclear response, and environmental remediation projects, which was a little outside of my wheelhouse, but gave me some good background in learning. About 12 years into that, decided to go to Duke University, get a certificate in NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. So got a chance to get over to something that actually used a bit of my biology background, doing environmental impact analysis, worked on some NEPA EISs in Wyoming for oil and gas, up in Alaska for aviation and airplanes. Down in Seattle, did a bunch of road and bridge projects. And when I got to California about 20 years ago, started working with railroads and been working with railroads ever since. And since I got a combined background of both environmental planning and environmental cleanup and remediation and compliance, I kind of do all of that with my railroad clients from the West Coast across the state, both with the class ones and with the short line railroads. So love being around the railroads. So I think of them as my big train sets now, and always have a good time when I get to visit the yards.
And so you've been in the industry for how many years then?
Oh, 35, going over 35 years now. That's why if people could see me, they'd say I no longer have any hair, but I'm not blaming that on the railroads.
Well, welcome to the podcast. Appreciate having you on. Appreciate TRC's support of the industry and support of having you on here. And speaking of the industry, we've got the esteemed professor from University of Illinois, Dr. Christopher Barkan. Yes?
Just Chris is fine.
Chris
Barkan.
Is good? Okay. All right. Welcome back, Chris. Why don't you give a quick, maybe to people that don't know you, if you were to do an elevator speech, what would you tell them?
Yeah, well, it's good to be back. Thank you very much for the invitation, Walt. I learned something from Peter just now, which is we share two things in common. One is that we've both been interested in railroads since we were quite young, and we're also both biologists. A lot of people don't know that about my background.
I knew there was something good about you, Chris. There we go.
And they probably don't understand how much remediation has to do with biology because it's the little bugs eating this stuff. So anyway,
that is true.
So I credit my father for my interest in railroad transportation. He was a transportation engineer, and from as long as I can remember, I've been interested thanks to him. And I really like to acknowledge him for the career I've had because it was him that pointed me in the right direction. But my first job in the railroad industry was working for the Association of American Railroads in their research and test department. I joined them in 1988 in Washington, D.C., worked there for 10 years, and then took my current position as a faculty member at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and been here ever since, and been really pleased, as Peter knows, to be hosting almost since the beginning here, the Railroad Environmental Conference, or RREC. And of course, that's part of what we'll be talking about today. But it's been a great career for me to be working closely with all members of all different aspects of the rail sector, class ones, regional short lines, and government personnel. So thanks again for inviting me.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm a little disappointed when you said we have something in common. I thought for sure it was going to be chicken farming. But
no.
Nope. But we're going with biology. That's fair. And you're very humble.
Chicken.
What's that?
I've eaten chicken.
Okay. Understood. And my folks live in Northwest Arkansas, and I've been by many a chicken house, and that's a smell you never forget. You're quite humble, Chris. We're just going to call you Chris. You also are the director of RailTEC, right? And just briefly, if you want to give a quick pitch for RailTEC, I think that'd be a great time.
Yeah, sure, certainly. So RailTEC stands for the Railroad Transportation and Engineering Center. It was part of what, when I was invited to come working here back in 1998, the idea was to rejuvenate the rail program. University of Illinois has had a world-class rail program dating back to the mid-19th century, but it had kind of faded a bit during the latter part of the 20th century. So my job was to rejuvenate that, to rebuild both the research and education programs. I think we've been successful with that. We've expanded in terms of our faculty and our staff. We've had now hundreds of students come through our program. Many of them have gone on to jobs in the rail industry, and I think that's one of the things I take a fair amount of pride in, that we've been helped to repopulate the railroad industry with people who are interested in and talented in railroad engineering and transportation principles. The other more recent development is that I also lead the FRA-funded National University Rail Transportation Center of Excellence, which is a consortium of 9 universities. And again, our mission is to promote railway engineering research and education, and again, continue contributing to advancements in rail technology, as well as expanding the railroad workforce, which we all understand, I think, the importance of that.
And so for short, that's New Rail, correct?
New Rail Center of Excellence, yeah.
New Rail Center of Excellence, RailTEC. So if you've heard those terms before, or if you've seen them in emails or on the web, if you have questions, I think this is a great person to reach out to, folks. He's easy to find on the University of Illinois website. We all know how to use Google by this point. Okay, well, Peter, it sounds like Chris has about 25 jobs. What do you do outside of TRC? What do you do for AREMA?
So for AREMA, I got started being more active with AREMA. Man, it's been 11 years ago, 12 years ago that I first joined the leadership of Committee 13, which is the environmental committee for AREMA. And I was asked at the time to be the secretary. Not sure that I appreciated what a long voyage it is, because on the AREMA committees, the positions last 3 years. So for me to get to the chair, which I currently am, of AREMA Committee 13, was at least a 9-year process by the time I'd be done with fulfilling my obligations. But with COVID in there, a couple extra years got added into it. So been on the leadership of AREMA Committee 13 now for going on 10, 11 years. Got another year and a half as chair of the AREMA Committee 13. But our mission on the Committee 13 is to support the development of Chapter 13, which is the environmental section of the AREMA manual. But also, we've been acting as ambassadors to the rest of AREMA to try and support the sustainability and resiliency efforts that are ongoing from AREMA leadership to see how we can best incorporate those into the railroad industry. So very active in AREMA and several other railroad organizations, because I think that we have a big opportunity to help the environment in a way that still makes railroads a commercial success around the country.
Perfect, and I think that's a great tie back to the history of RREC, or maybe as before we start talking about RREC, which is a conference. Chris, you had a phenomenal soundbite that you typed up, and hopefully you remember it. Why does this matter? Like in less than 60 seconds, like why does sustainability and resiliency, why does that matter in the railroad industry? Is that something you think you could capture?
Well, I'll give it a try. So, and they're two distinct, but I think related concepts. So sustainability, that word sort of started appearing, 10 or 15 years ago in a lot of different circles, and it intrigued me. And I guess I would say that sustainability to me is much more than just environmental performance. A lot of people sort of associate it with that. But really, if you think about it, all of the people in the industry want to be employed in sustainable roles in a sustainable industry that's providing sustainable transportation to North America and ultimately worldwide. And sustainable means we can keep doing it. We're not going to run out of gas or whatever it is. And so that means we need to be using resources as efficiently as possible. So sustainability is really about making sure that railroads are operating in an efficient and effective manner, serving their customers, whether they be freight shippers or passengers, and that they're going to be around, next year, next decade, next century, continuing to provide that. And so it has a lot to do with efficient engineering, including environmental performance. Resiliency, as I said, I think is a related concept. We need our infrastructure, we need our operations, we need everything to be able to withstand disruptions. Now, that doesn't mean we're never going to stop for at least brief moments, but we need to be able to recover quickly from events that may interfere with. So resiliency is a kind of a complement to sustainability in that sense.
Well stated. Yeah, I agree with that completely. And Peter, I didn't mean to cut you off, but if you want to add to that, or you want to, how do you see it? I think because I'll be honest with you, like what I hear, everything I heard Chris said was makes sense to me. When I sit on, say, a structures committee, though, and you bring this up, people are like, I don't follow.
Yeah.
How would you say that maybe to somebody that's involved in the industry, but maybe maybe they don't feel directly involved. Does that make sense?
It does. And I just wanted to play off of what Chris had said about the fact that it is much more than environmental. And we'll talk about this a little bit more as the conversation goes on. But when you look at the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, environmental is just a portion of that. There's also communities and education and hunger and poverty and all sorts of things that not only go beyond environmental, but the railroad can also support. And so, to your point, well, when we talk to folks who aren't directly related to environmental, maybe it's somebody related to running a short line through a community out in the middle of rural Texas. That the sustainable goal for them might not have to do with bugs and bunnies or water quality. It might have to do with making a more sustainable community by providing access for that community to foodstuffs they might not actually or normally have, or transportation to go to another place and expand their horizons. So there's a lot of things that involve in sustainability that go way beyond environmental, and to just think of it as an environmental goal is probably to limit your view of what sustainability really does and how it helps and improves our communities and really does make things more cost effective in the long run, which people might not normally assume.
And
Perfect.
and I'll respond to that, because one of the things that listening to Peter helps me, appreciate. One of the things I realized about myself not long after going to work at the Association of American Railroads in the late '80s was that what really appealed to me about rail transportation was its efficiency. And if you think about it, one of the ways we're going to achieve sustainability, again, in any domain of engineering or operation, is to try to be as efficient as possible, to use resources, whether they're energy, materials, personnel, to use those as efficiently as possible so that we don't run out. We don't run out of those resources. So that's one of the important pathways towards sustainability, is doing things efficiently. So I would say to people from your structures committee that, well, I think that they're probably practicing sustainable practices all the time and just not realizing that that's one of the attributes.
That's a great point. Yeah, that is a very good point. I think it's cool because I think if we had two other guests on here alongside the two of you, they would also have two slightly different answers that are complementary. And I think that's what's kind of neat about the whole topic. It is not entirely black and white. There's gray, and there's different applications. And just listening to the two of you talk, I mean, it's changed how I think about it. So then let's come back full circle here. Let's just ask the easy question. What does RREC stand for? And when did the conference start? Can we do that?
Yeah. So the RREC, Railroad Environmental Conference, the first conference was in, I should know this, I believe it was in 2000. I came here in 1998, but the predecessor to the RREC was a couple of conferences that I was helping to organize when I was working at the Association of American Railroads in the 1990s. The railroads in the 90s had lots of challenges associated with cleanup of contaminated soils, in particular diesel contaminated soils. So there was a lot of interest in how to improve the efficiency and efficacy of cleanups of these sites. One of the challenges was that regulators seemed to think that diesel had all the same hazardous and toxic characteristics that gasoline, and of course it doesn't. It's a more benign substance. And so my predecessor actually at the AAR, Peter Conlin, got involved with the University of Massachusetts Contaminated Soils Conference. And then in order to promote more information exchange and knowledge about how to clean up diesel contaminated soils, we ended up starting to have a one-day special symposium as part of that Contaminated Soils Conference, just focused on diesel and other railroad-specific problems. That was very successful. We had lots of railroads attending that. Near the end of the 90s, there was an increasing interest in pollution prevention and improved environmental management practices amongst the railroads. And so we launched another conference that was held at the University of Texas in the late 90s, and that was called the Pollution Prevention and Environmental Management Conference. Same thing, only focused now on P2 initiatives and better environmental management. Again, the idea is to promote information exchange both within the railroad industry and with other people who are expert on various subjects of interest to the industry. When I moved to the University of Illinois in 1998, the railroads came to me and said, look, we'd like one conference in the center of the country that all of our members have relatively easy access to. Well, Champaign-Urbana is close to the middle of the country. All the class ones are within 50 miles of here, or almost. And so it was kind of a logical location to have that first conference. And the first conference, I think we had maybe somewhere between 100 and 150 people attend. And now we routinely get 400 or more people attending the conference. And it's so, and the subjects and the focus of the Railroad Environmental Conference have shifted as the requirements of the industry and the interests of the industry have shifted. So that's one of the things that my colleague Emma Ehrenhardt and I take a lot of pride in, is that we really want to continually be listening to the railroads, the environmental engineering firms serving the railroad industry. What are the most important problems that railroads are faced with that we can focus the conference content on? And we have a whole process of interaction with, again, railroads and various other members of the railroad environmental community to ensure that.
Which is a perfect tie back, Peter, to Committee 13. I assume Committee 13 has been working hand in hand with Chris here on the sustainability and resiliency effort that's now has a broad blanket across everything at AREMA. You want to talk about that, or go ahead?
Yeah, and Committee 13 and its members have certainly been supporting the Railroad Environmental Conference since its inception. In fact, it really was a blended effort with Committee 13 and some of my the people I owe my patronage to that really got that started, along with Chris, and have kept it going through all these years. But I think AREMA really got its feet wet in the sustainability and resiliency field right about 2020, 2021, with the current president then, Trent Hudak from BNSF Railways. He really wanted to encourage AREMA to look more at how we could incorporate S&R into everyday operations, construction, maintenance of the railroads. And so he came to my chair predecessor, Carrie Harris from Canadian National Railroads, who was the chair of AREMA Committee 13 before I was, and asked her to spearhead an effort to develop a position paper on behalf of AREMA as to how AREMA would fulfill the S&R goals with the railroads. So between her and a couple other folks that really helped her out, Jennifer Yulin from Jacobs and my colleague Leo Thorbeck from TRC, they brought together a group that wrote that paper, came out in late 2021, and then start in 2022, Trent Hudak really wanted AREMA to try and bring that into a forum where people could come together and discuss, not just from an environmental perspective, as we discussed earlier, but all the ways that S&R could be woven into the fabric of the railroads. And so there was a forum, an S&R forum that was held in Florida in February of 2024, sponsored by AREMA, an all-day forum that discussed different aspects of S&R and how that fits with the railroads. Again, not just environmental, but also structural and maintenance away. And how do you make the railroads both sustainable and, as Chris mentioned, resilient? Because with climate change comes a lot of weather that affects the railroads. We've seen those direct impacts on railroads, especially on the Gulf Coast. How do you keep the railroads running, keep communities served, even in the face of these more intense storms that are coming through as climate change grabs and takes more effect on the planet? So that was a very successful opportunity. After that, people kept asking, when can we have another S&R forum? And just because of the limited resources, there's a lot of groups in AREMA, a lot of committees. Committee 13 is just one of them. And so we have to cycle through all those committees, give them all opportunities for to have forum and discussions like that. So Trent, before he left the presidency for AREMA, came up with another idea. Maybe we tack this on to the Railroad Environmental Conference, which is already an existing opportunity, and we have an extra day where we talk just about S&R. And I want to thank Chris for being willing to consider that.
And I apologize. So just to come back here, 24, that was the symposium in Tampa area,
Yep,
right? Okay.
yep,
And so the forum there, you had so much success with that obviously the symposiums, if people follow along each year, one of the functional groups is responsible for putting on a forum. And
yes.
so like 2025 was structures. We had a railroad bridge forum in Fort Worth. This year, I want to say it's CNS. So point being, there's not enough room to have 15 forums, or I'm sorry, 15 symposiums a year. So you guys pulled that forum and now you tacked on a day, and that's Sustainability and Resiliency Day at REREC.
Yeah. So one day,
That was
sponsored
a
by
mouthful, by
AREMA.
the way.
One day at AREMA, or one day at the REREC, sponsored by AREMA, in cooperation with the REREC to talk just about sustainability and resiliency. And as we mentioned earlier, not just about environmental topics. We're talking about the full breadth of how all 17 of the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, can be potentially incorporated by the railroads. And every committee, every aspect of railroading is going to take a look at those, or it has been taking a look at those SDGs and thinking which ones best fit our subjects and how do we incorporate those. And this is an opportunity to discuss that, whether it's engineers or it's geologists or it's environmental folks or it's something else, people that just do planning and how often do you move cars and when. That's all going to be discussed during the SNR day.
Oh, that's cool. That is a broad brush, and so if folks are listening, you don't have to just specialize in environmental engineering. Sounds like to attend this day. In fact, the whole conference. It sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. I really want to stress that latter point, which is that the SNR Day is for everybody, both inside and outside AREMA, who's interested in a long-term future for our rail industry. Um, we're, we're the industry has continued to improve and progress in terms of more and more sustainable practices. Again, often not with that name on it, but they're underlying what railroads are trying to do. And this is an annual, hopefully an annual forum now to discuss and exchange information on best practices of how to achieve that goal.
Yeah, I think that's
That's
a key
awesome.
thing is Trent had that goal of seeing us do something on a regular basis, on an annual basis. And the REREC provides us the opportunity. We're very grateful because Chris's staff does all the legwork. Emma and her team are amazing. Cannot say enough good things about them. And for us to pull this together without them would be so much more work. I can't imagine. And so for Chris to allow us to bring these folks together as part of his effort, something that we're incredibly grateful for.
Well, it's a privilege to be able to do that. It's so thank you, Peter. And I do want to really credit both Committee 13, yourself, others, and AREMA as an organization for having brought this initiative to us. It's an opportunity for us, and we're really pleased to be a part of it.
So let's get down to brass tacks. When is the conference? When's it? I know it's in Champaign. What are the official dates of the conference, and when is the official date of, say, the SNR Day?
Yeah, so the conference is Tuesday and Wednesday, the 11th and 12th of November, and then we move right on into Thursday on the 13th is the SNR Day. So,
okay, so the 13th. So at the time of recording this, we're in October. So my hope is that by the time this launches, people will hear this if they haven't already, and we'll still have time to sign up. I'm assuming they can sign up all the way till day of almost, or
yeah, I mean, like many events, as you get closer, the registration fee gets a little bit higher because the more we can plan in advance for certain numbers of attendees. So I would say if anybody's interested, register as soon as possible because you'll save some money.
yeah. And I do know that as the functional groups, we have each of us have goals, sustainability and resiliency goals that each committee, I think at this point, even has someone has put up their hand and they're representing, say, the steel committee or the concrete committee, whatever. And they're meeting regularly as well. So it's cool to see this come together. And I mean, here we are, it's 25. And the fact that it came together from a 2024 symposium and now it's part of it's cool. This is a really neat I don't know what word I'm looking for here, but
Synergy.
synergy. Thank you.
Yeah,
I should
and
know
I
that.
really appreciate the AREMA management and leadership being willing to consider it so quickly, because that was one of
Yep.
my concerns as well. As we just kind of started talking about it, and it came together. Beth and Chris and Emma and everybody just came together and knocked this thing out in a very short period of time in order for us to get it advertised and organized. So I think it was an effort everybody saw as being necessary, and they really threw themselves into it.
Cool. Well, let's wrap this up. I would say, what does the future of sustainability and resiliency look like in the railroad world? Although I give you each a shot at
Yeah.
this one.
I'm going to go with maybe the short-term future, and Chris has the vision for the long-term future for sure. But I mean, I think in the short term, our goal, especially with this SNR day, is one, hopefully it'll be a success. The more people can get to come, the more topics we can discuss. We'd like to do this every year, and this is kind of the first test trial of it. See how it goes. Hopefully, every year we'll have an SNR day from AREMA sponsored at the RREC. But our immediate goal with AREMA, like you mentioned earlier, Walt, we have the ambassadors from each committee that Committee 13 has been working with. And the goal is to try and see how can we get each committee to incorporate the UN SDGs into their section of the manual. Because ultimately, that's the tool. That's what AREMA is producing to help the railroads, is the AREMA engineering manual. And we want to see how we can highlight incorporation of the SDGs into that. So our first presentation of SNR Day is going to be a call really from one of our railroad speakers to say, hey, we want to see the SDGs in the manual. How can you help us do that? And we're going to continue to work with the committees to get that done over the next couple of years. But then all the presentations will go into ways in which various consultants, various engineers, various railroads are considering how the SDGs get worked into the things they're doing, the projects they're doing. They're going to highlight that. And that we really want everybody to walk away from that one day thinking about, on my next project, how am I going to incorporate SDGs? How am I going to make my project more sustainable? How am I going to make my project more resilient? And hopefully the next year they'll come back and they'll give us their experience and talk about how those projects worked out. And that leads us, I guess, into what is the long-term future of SNR with railroads. And Chris, do you have a vision for that?
Well, I'll give you my thoughts. I'm not sure that I have the vision for the railroad industry, but here's what I will offer on that, which is that one of the advantages railroads have in the context of sustainability, but also in the context of economics, is that they are more efficient at doing what they do, transporting goods and people over land, than their principal competition, namely highway, whether it's trucks or automobiles. We do more with less, whether it's less land, less energy, less personnel needed to support all this. And so that to me is, again, as I said earlier in this podcast, it's the ability to use resources as efficiently as possible to achieve a sustainable transportation system. But one of the other things is, of course, the railroads can't just sit on their haunches. The other sectors, especially the highway sector, are continually moving towards making their activities more efficient and more economical and more sustainable. So railroads can't just sit back; they have to keep on, to use the phrase that I was taught many decades ago now, continuous improvement. There needs to be continuous improvement in railroads, a variety of different metrics of railroad performance in order to stay ahead of their competition. And again, there are some intrinsic physical characteristics of rail transportation that give them an advantage in that. We teach those in our classes here, but again, it's not something that they can just sit back and rely on forever. They're going to have to continuously improve.
And it sounds like that's a great competition that's just going to benefit generations to come.
Right. And I think the SNR Day, if it blossoms the way we're hoping it will, is going to provide one more forum for that kind of specific conversation, that focused conversation on how can we continue to do these things better, so that we can remain the preeminent sustainable transportation mode.
Perfect. That's going to be hard to follow, Peter. You want to end it on that?
I don't know if I can end it on that. The only thing I'll add to that is I appreciate Chris also is very active in incorporating his students into these events. They get to come to the AREMA Committee 13 dinner as part of the RREC. They're there present helping out, and they're also getting a chance to listen. And that is our best hope, is that next generation of railroaders thinking about these things as they go on to their railroad futures. And I think the opportunity to hold all of this at a university, couldn't pick a better place.
Cool. That is a win-win-win. All right. Well, thank you both for being on the podcast, and I'm wishing you all the best success with the upcoming SNR Day and the REREC conference, of course, as well, and just the combined event. And appreciate your time.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for rolling with AREMA on today's episode of Platform Chats. For further information about AREMA, please visit arema.org or contact us at info@arema.org.